Happy Days, Top 20, Weird but True Facts You Might Not Know. You think you know Happy Days? Think again. Behind the laughs, jukebox tunes, and Fonzie's leather jacket lies a wild world of strange auditions, vanishing characters, and shocking behind-the-scenes twists. This video dives into 20 weird but true facts you probably never heard about one of TV's most iconic shows. Let's delve right in. Pinky Tuscadero's short stint. Under the glow of network hype and roaring anticipation, Happy Days kicked off its fourth season with a bold storyline that had all eyes glued to the screen. The spotlight turned to Pinky Tuscadero, a dazzling, leather-clad daredevil with nerves of steel and an entrance that screamed attitude. Played by Roz Kelly, Pinky wasn't meant to be a guest star. She was introduced as Fonzie's fiery love interest, a character designed to match his cool with equal charisma and chaos. But what unfolded off-camera was a different story altogether. Tensions surfaced quickly. Kelly, known for her blunt, no-nonsense demeanor, never quite blended into the tight-knit ensemble, and the atmosphere behind the scenes grew uneasy. Producers took notice. Although the press pushed the romance as TV's next great couple, the dynamic between Kelly and the core cast lacked cohesion. Industry insiders at the time described the energy as off, and without that harmony, the storyline began to unravel. Despite a strong debut, Pinky was swiftly phased out, her departure abrupt, unexplained within the show, and largely unaddressed in reruns. Over time, her three-episode arc became a curious footnote in television history, a case study in how character potential can collapse under the weight of misalignment. Fonz versus Micky Dolenz. Casting the coolest guy on TV was never going to be a simple choice, but few expected the final showdown to come down to a Shakespeare-trained actor and a rock band drummer with sitcom roots. As producers searched for the right man to bring Fonzie to life, Henry Winkler walked into the room with theater chops, confidence, and a Brooklyn swagger. But standing nearby, waiting for his own shot, was Micky Dolenz. Yes, that Micky Dolenz from the Monkees. With his TV experience, comedic timing, and natural charisma, Dolenz brought plenty to the table. Trouble was, the guy was 6 feet tall, and next to Ron Howard's more modest stature, he loomed a bit too large. Meanwhile, Winkler stood at 5'6", and his size helped balance the visual chemistry of the cast. That subtle detail turned out to be a decisive factor. According to multiple accounts, Dolenz's height pushed producers in a different direction, and Winkler landed the part. It's one of those small behind-the-scenes decisions that changed TV history. Had the drummer gotten the nod, Fonzie might have worn a different grin, and the phrase, "sit on it," might never have caught fire. Timing, it turns out, was everything. Winkler hated motorcycles. Who would have guessed the king of cool couldn't stand the one thing his character was never seen without? Fonzie and motorcycles go hand in hand on screen, but behind the camera, Henry Winkler was practically allergic to the darn things. From the start, he had no clue how to ride. And the one time producers asked him to move the bike a measly 5 feet for a simple take, chaos unfolded. He twisted the throttle the wrong way, launched the machine like a cannonball, and nearly steamrolled the poor director of photography. Cameras stopped, crew scattered. The tough guy had become a runaway hazard. To keep filming smooth and prevent further accidents, they got clever. They bolted the bike onto a rolling platform, pulled it along, and let Winkler mime the ride. No engine, no control, but plenty of Hollywood sleight of hand. As it turns out, the Fonzie you saw cruising down Milwaukee streets wasn't quite the rebel on wheels he appeared to be. In truth, the leather jacket hid more than attitude. It masked a deep fear of anything with 2 wheels and an engine. Yet somehow, that only made the performance more legendary. Show's original title, Cool. In television history, titles carry weight, and sometimes the fate of a series hangs on a single word. Early in development, the creators of Happy Days flirted with a different name, a sharp, snappy label meant to capture the carefree attitude of the era. That name? Cool. It had edge, brevity, and rhythm, but also stirred up unintended images. While aiming for 1950s charm, it risked evoking cigarette ads and slick marketing tropes from a very different cultural lane. Internally, doubts began to rise. The production team wanted warmth, not detachment. That's when a shift happened. The name Happy Days entered the conversation. Brighter, simpler, closer to the emotional center of the concept. Though specific accounts about who proposed the change vary, the rebranding reflected a more optimistic tone, one that lined up perfectly with the show's nostalgic embrace of post-war America. By the time the theme song kicked in and Richie Cunningham took his first stroll through Arnold's, the new title had already laid the emotional groundwork. What started as a branding decision quietly helped shape the entire identity of a cultural juggernaut. In the end, what they chose didn't chase cool. It celebrated something far more lasting. What's your all-time favorite Happy Days moment or line? Character names' real origins. What's in a name when it comes to characters that shaped a generation? In the case of Happy Days, the answer lies somewhere between family ties and childhood sidewalks. Gary Marshall, the mind behind the series, didn't pull his character names from thin air. He borrowed them from real life, the kind filled with small-town anecdotes and Sunday rituals. Richie Cunningham, for example, shared his name with a boy Marshall used to see at church, a kid whose clean-cut vibe matched the world he was building. Patsy Weber? That came from someone his wife remembered from school, a name that stuck simply because it rang with the right kind of charm. And Fonzie, well, that one had an even more personal root. Marshall's birth name was Masciarelli, and the original plan was to call Fonzie Arthur Masciarelli, but it didn't sit right in terms of rhythm or branding, so they spun it into Fonzarelli, a name with bite and swagger. From there, the Fonz practically wrote itself. These weren't names assigned at random. They were stitched from memory, molded into television, and given a second life beneath the glow of primetime lights. Howard's Vietnam Deferment. In an era shadowed by uncertainty, when headlines were filled with casualty counts and draft numbers carried the weight of destiny, Ron Howard made a choice that rippled far beyond the soundstage. He stepped into the role of Richie Cunningham, not only as an actor pursuing the next step in his career, but as a young man facing the quiet anxiety of the Vietnam draft. According to his own recollection years later, he'd drawn a low number in the draft lottery, low enough to raise real concern. Around that time, he came across the notion that employment directly supporting a sizable production crew might qualify someone for deferment. With Happy Days gearing up as a full-fledged network series, that possibility carried weight. Whether the legal basis was clear or not, the thought stayed with him. If the show succeeded, he reasoned, perhaps his position could shield him. History suggests he likely wouldn't have been called, as the draft was winding down by 1973. But the worry was real. For Howard, stepping onto that set meant more than stepping into character. It meant placing a quiet hope in the idea that television might offer a way through the storm. Winkler's Dyslexia and Audition. Growing up, Henry Winkler carried a weight he couldn't name. School left him frustrated, misunderstood, and constantly labeled as lazy or slow. No one knew the truth, not his teachers, not his classmates, not even Henry himself. It wasn't until age 31, after watching his stepson face similar challenges, that Winkler finally learned he had dyslexia. That diagnosis unlocked decades of confusion and reframed his entire past. But even without answers at the time, he pushed forward. During his audition for Happy Days, he was handed a script with 6 lines, short on paper, but a mountain for someone struggling to decode the text. Instead of stumbling through it, he made a bold choice. He let instinct take over. He threw the words aside and brought the character to life with body language, cadence, and a spark that felt unscripted. That moment of improvisation didn't just land him the role of Fonzie. It revealed a kind of brilliance that never came through in classrooms. Years later, Winkler would become a voice for kids battling learning disabilities, helping them find their path, much like he found his on a studio lot, with a leather jacket and a little risk. Chuck Cunningham syndrome. How does a character go from sharing the family dinner table to being erased from the family tree without so much as a goodbye? That's the strange fate of Chuck Cunningham, the eldest son on Happy Days who started out dribbling basketballs and tossing out big brother advice, only to vanish by the third season. One day he was part of the script, the next he was treated as if he never existed. No exit scene, no in-universe explanation, not a single reference afterward. The writers didn't kill him off, they airbrushed him out. This abrupt disappearance wasn't ignored by pop culture, it became a textbook example. Today, when a show erases a character midstream without a trace, it's labeled with a name born from Chuck's ghostly fade: Chuck Cunningham syndrome. Over the years, this term has come to define a specific kind of television amnesia, one that rewrites history while pretending it was always that way. And Chuck wasn't alone. The syndrome has echoed across other shows, from Family Matters to The West Wing. For someone barely written into the show's arc, Chuck's legacy endures in the most ironically memorable way possible. By disappearing so completely, he became immortal and unintentionally created one of television's most enduring cautionary tales. Mork from Ork Genesis. A sitcom set in 1950s, Milwaukee doesn't exactly scream aliens welcome, but a spark of childhood imagination changed everything. Gary Marshall's young son, glued to Star Wars and bubbling with cosmic ideas, thought the show needed a visitor from space. Not a time traveler or a dream sequence, but a full-on extraterrestrial. Marshall, being the kind of dad who listens, gave it a shot. That's how Mork from Ork crashed into Happy Days, like a UFO into suburbia. But casting this outlandish oddball wasn't easy. Famous names passed, unsure how to land such a zany part. Enter Ronnie Marshall, Gary's sister. She had spotted a quirky guy during a casting session, one who bounced around rooms like gravity had no grip on him. That man was Robin Williams. When he auditioned, he didn't read the lines straight. He flipped the script, sat on his head, riffed from thin air, and made the whole room double over. Everyone watching knew they'd found their Mork. Williams turned what could have been a throwaway guest role into a launchpad, one that sent him rocketing toward a career nobody on Earth could have predicted. Nanu wasn't in the script. He made it up on the spot. Infamous, jump the shark. When did a leather-clad greaser flying over a shark become the defining symbol of TV shows going off the rails? The answer lies in a sun-soaked episode of Happy Days, where Fonzie, yes, the jukebox-thumping icon of cool, strapped on water skis and soared over a floating cage. The stunt wasn't random. It came from Henry Winkler's surprising skill on the water, and the producers wanted to build an episode around it. Winkler handled most of the skiing himself, gliding across the waves in a custom-cut leather jacket with the lining stripped out to keep it buoyant. The actual leap, though, called for a stunt double. That jump didn't just entertain, it launched a phrase. Jump the shark became TV shorthand for the exact point when a series slips into absurdity. Critics had a field day. But Winkler? He leaned into the joke, never flinching. That episode didn't kill the show. It became its most quoted legacy. And whether folks saw it as brilliance or bizarre, Happy Days rode that wave all the way to syndication history. Decades later, media scholars still cite the moment in pop culture classes, and the phrase lives on. A strange, yet lasting tribute to a show that dared to get airborne. Love discovering the untold stories behind classic TV? Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. There's plenty more coming. The 2011 lawsuit. Bright studio lights don't always cast away the shadows behind the scenes. In 2011, a legal battle burst into view when 5 familiar names from Happy Days, Anson Williams, Donnie Most, Aaron Moran, Marion Ross, and the widow of Tom Bosley, took CBS and Paramount to court. The heart of their grievance? Years of unpaid merchandising revenue, including profits from slot machines that used their likenesses without proper compensation. These weren't minor disputes over trivia mugs or t-shirts. Their faces had become part of a multi-million-dollar licensing machine, while their contracts, signed in another era, had been overlooked. What began as a nostalgic sitcom turned into a cautionary tale about intellectual property and legacy rights. The group didn't ask for chump change. Their lawsuit sought $10 million. In the end, the case didn't reach that mark, but each party settled for $65,000 and reportedly found peace in the outcome. The story serves as a stark reminder. Even the most wholesome shows can leave behind disputes that no laugh track can drown out. And in Hollywood, residuals matter, especially when your name helped shape a generation. For many in the industry, it became a case study on the importance of fair compensation in a syndication-driven world. Weezer's Buddy Holly video. What happens when a 90s alt-rock band crashes the set of a 70s sitcom that pretended to be the 50s? You get one of the most delightfully bizarre music videos of its decade. In 1994, Weezer dropped Buddy Holly, and instead of shooting a typical concert clip, they transported fans straight into Arnold's drive-in. But they didn't do it alone. Al Molinaro, yes, the original Al from Happy Days, stepped back into his apron and reintroduced the band as if they were the pride of Kenosha, Wisconsin. The twist? Weezer was pure Los Angeles, but the shout-out honored Molinaro's real hometown. To sell the illusion, the video spliced crisp new footage of the band with vintage scenes from the sitcom, creating a seamless mashup of eras. Viewers saw the Fonz, Richie, and the gang reacting to Weezer's performance, even though those clips were lifted straight from old episodes. The result was so convincing that casual fans believed the band had time-traveled. Directed by Spike Jonze, who would later earn Oscar buzz for his off-kilter brilliance, the video won multiple awards and became a cultural touchstone. In under 4 minutes, it managed to revive 2 generations of cool, all from the comfort of a 1950s-style booth. Fonzie's motorcycle auction. A gleaming relic of TV legend found its way to the auction block in 2011. Fonzie's motorcycle, the same Triumph Trophy TR5 that once helped define a generation's version of cool. Customized by stuntman Bud Ekins, the bike featured stripped-down fenders and a silver gas tank built to reflect the rebel image of its famous rider. It stood as more than a prop. It became a cultural artifact. Bonhams offered it as part of their Classic California collection at the Peterson Automotive Museum, setting estimates between $60,000 and $80,000. But this machine didn't coast into a new garage quietly. Instead, it surpassed expectations and sold for $87,500, despite not being in running condition. Later, in 2018, it roared back into headlines after fetching an astonishing $179,200 at a separate auction in Las Vegas. For collectors, the price wasn't about horsepower, it was about history. And for fans of Happy Days, it proved that a worn-out motorcycle, touched by television myth, could command more than admiration. It could demand a fortune. Every dent, every bolt, carried the weight of prime-time iconography. Today, it's not simply remembered as Fonzie's ride. It's revered as a totem of a time when television defined American cool. Anson Williams sang songs. Money talks in show business, and on Happy Days it often sang too. Music from the 1950s helped set the mood at Arnold's drive-in, but licensing those oldies could eat up a serious chunk of the show's budget. So, the production team got creative. Instead of paying top dollar for vintage records, they leaned on Anson Williams, better known as Potsy, to carry the tunes himself. With a clean-cut smile and a surprisingly smooth voice, Williams stepped up to the mic and recorded covers that kept the jukebox spinning without breaking the bank. From background melodies to full-on performances, his vocals gave the show authenticity while avoiding legal tangles over royalties. Most viewers didn't catch on. They assumed the tracks came straight from original recordings. But tucked between the laughs and leather jackets was a clever workaround that blended talent and thrift. Williams didn't just act, he harmonized with the financial realities of network TV. And in doing so, he helped Happy Days preserve its musical soul without getting tangled in red tape or record label fees. Years later, many fans still recall Potsy's on-screen performances fondly, unaware that behind the scenes, those moments were born from economic necessity and creative ingenuity. Happy Days, the musical. In a dazzling turn of television nostalgia reimagined for the stage, Happy Days. The musical burst onto the scene in 2007 with its premiere at the Falcon Theater in Burbank, California, helmed by none other than Gary Marshall himself. Rewriting sitcom history with tap shoes and spotlights, the production swapped laugh tracks for live harmonies, complete with a sock-hop spirit and jukebox charm. The show didn't stay put for long. Its next stop brought it east to the Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey and the Goodspeed Opera House in Connecticut, where audiences were treated to fresh arrangements of classic characters and choreography that winked at the 1950s without staying stuck in it. By 2008, a national U.S. tour took the musical to cities across the country, carrying Fonzie, Richie, and the gang from coast to coast. In 2014, the production made its UK debut, kicking off in Bromley before heading across Britain in a full-fledged tour. The musical featured original songs by Paul Williams and a book by Marshall himself, blending heart and humor with Broadway flair. For fans on both sides of the Atlantic, it was a toe-tapping tribute to an era where cool ruled, and every curtain rise came with a dose of diner daydream charm. Do you think the show would work if it were rebooted for a modern audience? Share your thoughts in the comments. Numerous spin-offs. How far can one sitcom stretch its universe before it becomes a constellation of its own? In the case of Happy Days, the answer lies in a sprawling lineup of spin-offs that radiated from its success. The series gave birth to no fewer than 5 live-action offshoots, each tracing a different thread from its cast of characters. Laverne and Shirley soared in popularity, eventually rivaling the original. Mork and Mindy, born from an alien guest appearance, helped launch Robin Williams into stardom. Joni Loves Chachi followed a younger couple chasing musical dreams in Chicago. Meanwhile, lesser-known entries like Blansky's Beauties and Out of the Blue flirted with broader concepts. One focused on Vegas showgirls, the other on an angel in training, with varying results. A curious scheduling glitch caused Out of the Blue to premiere ahead of the episode that introduced its lead, adding to the confusion over its spin-off status. Animated adaptations soon followed, including the Fonz and the Happy Days gang, Laverne and Shirley in the Army, and a cartoon, Mork and Mindy. As for Leather Tuscadero, played by Susie Quattro, a solo show was proposed, but she turned it down, choosing music over more screen time. Across formats and genres, Happy Days proved it wasn't just a hit, it was a franchise factory. Fonzie's leather jacket. Fonzie didn't always strut into Arnold's wearing the iconic leather jacket that would later become television's most rebellious uniform. In the earliest episodes, the King of Cool had to settle for a tan windbreaker, thanks to ABC executives who feared that black leather would scream juvenile delinquent to nervous middle American audiences. Gary Marshall, never short on creative solutions, cut a deal. Fonzie could wear the jacket only if he was near his motorcycle, under the logic that leather offered more safety on 2 wheels. To make it work, production began staging his scenes within arm's reach of the bike, indoors, outdoors, wherever the camera rolled. As ratings climbed and Fonzie evolved into a cultural force, the restrictions melted away. Soon, the leather jacket appeared in every scene, whether the bike was parked or not. The windbreaker was quietly retired, and the leather, by now a second skin, cemented itself as a piece of television legend. Eventually, one of Fonzie's original jackets landed in the Smithsonian, where it's displayed not as a costume, but as an emblem of how a fictional character elbowed his way into American pop culture history, one zipper at a time. It's not just wardrobe, it's iconography in cowhide. Ron Howard almost passed roll. Before Richie Cunningham ever flashed a grin on screen, Ron Howard stood on the edge of turning it all down. Having already spent much of his youth in front of television audiences as Opie Taylor, he wasn't eager to risk being typecast as a perpetual teenager. The idea of spending more years locked in adolescence on camera gave him pause. He shared his concerns with Gary Marshall, candidly admitting that he didn't want to be stuck in high school forever. Marshall listened, then offered a promise. If the show moved forward, the characters would age, graduate, and grow, as real people do. That assurance struck a chord. Howard reconsidered. He understood that the role wouldn't be a step backward, but part of a larger arc, one that gave him space to evolve both as a performer and a future filmmaker. So he agreed. That decision not only opened the door to Richie's earnest charm on Happy Days, but, quietly, helped launch a career that would later win Oscars behind the camera. A single conversation, earnest, honest, human, gave us a character millions came to cherish, and a creator the industry would one day revere. Show originally pitched for the 1920s/30s. Why would anyone choose jukeboxes over jazz bands, or saddle shoes over spats? That's exactly the question Gary Marshall faced when Paramount first approached him with a proposal to craft a sitcom set in the 1920s or 30s. Instead of diving into an era he hadn't lived, he pitched a world he knew firsthand, the 50s and early 60s, a time of drive-ins, high school dances, and Letterman jackets. His initial effort, a pilot titled Love and the Television Set, aired quietly inside an anthology series, but failed to spark network interest. Then came a cultural shift. The unexpected success of American Graffiti rekindled America's fascination with mid-century innocence. Studio heads came back around, and this time, Marshall's vision landed. With Ron Howard, Anson Williams, and Marion Ross already attached from the unaired pilot, Happy Days took shape. Grounded not in guesswork, but in real-life rhythms of a bygone youth. Marshall's instinct to root the story in his own lived experience proved to be the show's secret strength. He wasn't romanticizing an era he'd only read about. He was inviting audiences into a version of his own adolescence. That honesty, wrapped in laughter and love, made the show timeless. And that's how Jukeboxes won. House exterior location. The home where the Cunninghams waved goodbye and Fonzie strolled up the driveway isn't in Milwaukee. It's actually tucked away in the heart of Los Angeles. That familiar white colonial house seen in exterior shots throughout Happy Days lives at 565 North Cahuenga Boulevard, only a few blocks from Paramount Studios. Built in 1923, the house was a practical choice for the show's producers, offering a classically American look that matched the story's wholesome Midwest setting. Interestingly, the show kept the real street number, but changed the address to 565 North Clinton Drive to better suit the fictional Milwaukee backdrop. While interior scenes were filmed on a studio set, that actual house became a recognizable icon, anchoring the series in visual authenticity. Over the years, it's barely changed, holding on to its classic shape and timeless charm. Passers-by today will still see the same arched windows, painted shutters, and neatly trimmed lawn that viewers saw on screen each week. For fans of the series, it's more than a filming location. It's a small piece of television history sitting quietly on a residential street, offering one more reason to smile during a stroll through LA's film-storied neighborhoods. Think you've seen everything Star Trek has to offer? Think again. Behind the iconic starships and unforgettable characters lies a treasure trove of hidden details, on-set secrets, and clever tricks that most fans never noticed. In this video, we're uncovering 20 fascinating behind-the-scenes surprises that reveal the creativity and chaos behind one of sci-fi's greatest legends. Recycled whiskey bottles as alien props. Here's a fun detail you probably never noticed while watching Star Trek. Those fancy alien liquor bottles. They weren't from some far-off galaxy. They were recycled whiskey bottles from right here on Earth. That's right. Throughout the original series, the Star Trek prop team pulled off some seriously clever tricks. One of their best, turning regular, everyday objects into something that looked otherworldly. And the most famous example might just be the Saurian brandy bottle. If it looks familiar, that's because it used to hold George Dickel Tennessee whiskey, specifically the 1964 commemorative edition. The bottle had a powder horn shape that gave it just the right alien vibe. A few small changes, and suddenly it looked like it came from another planet. Both dark and light brown versions were used on screen, but fans agree the lighter brown bottle matches what we saw most often. These bottles became so iconic, collectors today go wild for them. If you happen to have an original 1964 bottle, still sealed and in perfect condition, you've got something really rare. They're not just prized by Trekkies, but also by whiskey fans. And this bottle trick wasn't a one-time deal. The show's team pulled off tons of similar moves. Tight budgets and fast-paced production meant they had to get creative. Salt shakers turned into McCoy's medical tools. Old household appliances got turned into alien gadgets. Even packing materials ended up as part of control panels on the bridge. Scotty's missing finger. Here's a detail that even longtime Star Trek fans often miss. Scotty, the ever-reliable chief engineer, was hiding something in plain sight. James Doohan, the man behind Montgomery's Scotty Scott, had a missing finger. And unless you were really paying attention, you probably never noticed. Let's rewind. Before he was keeping the Enterprise running at warp speed, Doohan was a real-life war hero. During World War II, he served as a lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Artillery. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, he led his unit across Juno Beach as part of the Normandy invasion. In the chaos, he was hit by 6 bullets, 4 in his leg, 1 in his chest, and 1 that took off his right middle finger. That chest shot? It would have been fatal, but a silver cigarette case in his pocket took the brunt of it and saved his life. Doohan was recognized for his bravery, but he carried the scars of battle, including the missing finger, for the rest of his life. So how did the show hide it? Pretty cleverly, actually. The crew used all kinds of tricks to make sure viewers never saw Doohan's hand injury. He often used his left hand in scenes or kept his right hand curled up and out of frame. Directors usually filmed him from the left, especially when he was working on engineering panels. For close-ups that needed 2 hands, they sometimes used a hand double. Even the props were designed with this in mind. Some tools were made so Scotty could handle them without revealing anything. The font-size feud between Kirk and Spock. Most fans never realized that one of Star Trek's earliest behind-the-scenes tensions had nothing to do with scripts or storylines. It was about font size. That's right. William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy had a quiet but serious disagreement over how big their names appeared in the opening credits. Buried in Nimoy's contract was a clause that required his name to be no less than 75% the size of Shatner's. It wasn't just a formatting choice, it was a calculated nod to equal importance. Starting with the 4th episode, The Naked Time, viewers began to see the change. Also starring Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock, sized precisely to meet that percentage. Studio memos even confirmed that Nimoy's credit should never exceed 75% of Shatner's, and older episodes were adjusted accordingly for reruns. This wasn't just about ego, it reflected a broader dynamic between the two stars. Both actors had what's known as a favored nations clause, meaning any perk given to one, whether it was more money, more screen time, or even the chance to direct, had to be offered to the other. When Nimoy directed a Star Trek film, Shatner promptly insisted on doing the next. While their rivalry stayed mostly professional, it definitely influenced how the franchise evolved. In contrast, other cast members like DeForest Kelley didn't receive such careful treatment. He occasionally got better billing than his contract required, but only when the studio felt like it. In the end, that seemingly small font-size clause revealed much more than meets the eye. James R. Kirk Tombstone error. Even in its earliest episodes, Star Trek wasn't immune to slip-ups. One of the most famous? Captain Kirk's tombstone, complete with the wrong name. In the third episode, Where No Man Has Gone Before, Kirk's friend Gary Mitchell gains godlike powers and creates a grave for him. The headstone reads, James R. Kirk. But longtime fans know that's not right. His middle name is Tiberius. So what happened? It was simply a continuity error. The episode was filmed early on, before certain character details were firmly established. Uniforms looked slightly different, and the tombstone, clearly, missed the mark. Strangely enough, it was never corrected, not even in the remastered version years later. Why not fix it? The remastering team explained that changing the text would have required complicated rotoscope work, too much effort for such a brief visual, so they left it. Instead, Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry offered a charming in-universe explanation. According to writer D.C. Fontana, Roddenberry said Mitchell, despite his powers, was still human at heart. He made a mistake. Flipped Enterprise shot to hide Earth. You might not notice it at first glance, but in several episodes of the original Star Trek, the USS Enterprise appears to be flying backward. It wasn't a mistake. It was a clever cost-saving trick by the visual effects team. To avoid reshooting scenes when Earth or another background element accidentally showed up, the editors simply flipped the footage horizontally. That allowed them to reuse existing shots without blowing the budget. But flipping the image came with one noticeable side effect: the ship's registry number, the iconic NCC-1701, printed across the saucer and nacelles. It ended up backward. Casual viewers rarely noticed, but eagle-eyed fans eventually caught on. One clear example is during an episode where the Enterprise docks at a starbase. You can see the reversed numbers on the underside of the ship. If you really pay attention, you'll even spot mirrored details on the pylons. This technique shows up in multiple episodes. It was a quick fix that solved a practical problem, but left behind tiny continuity glitches that fans still enjoy hunting down. What was once a budget workaround has now become a beloved bit of Star Trek trivia. Did you ever catch one of these goofs or Easter eggs on your own? If so, which one? Ping pong ball starship. Here's one for the hardcore fans. The very first alien ship the Enterprise ever encountered? It looked huge, mysterious, and powerful on screen, but in reality, it was made out of ping pong balls. No joke. The ship was called the Fisarius, and it showed up in the episode The Corbomite Maneuver. That intimidating spacecraft was actually built using a pretty basic technique: a big sphere with ping pong balls, cut in half, glued all over it. According to production notes, they intentionally kept it slightly out of focus on camera to help sell the illusion. The whole thing was dreamed up by designer Matt Jeffries, and many credit Hua Chang with building the actual model, as mentioned in old Desilu studio records. Some say it wasn't just ping pong balls, It may have been a plaster base with other parts added on top. To give it that eerie, alien vibe, the effects team hooked up dimmer switches to make the ship's surface pulse with light. That simple trick made it feel alive, like it had real power. But pulling off the effect wasn't easy. The scenes were shot over months in 1966 at the Howard Anderson Company, and the final cost rang up to more than $17,000, huge for the time. And here's the kicker. Those delays meant the episode didn't air first, even though it was meant to. But when it did finally show up, fans were blown away by how alien and advanced the Fesarius looked. Fast forward to 2006, CBS gave the ship a digital facelift for the remastered series. Visual effects artist Michael Okuda said they stayed true to the original design, but added small touches they wish they could have done back in the day. Rear projection starfield trick. When we watched the Enterprise glide through endless space, it felt like the ship was really out there, zipping past thousands of stars. But behind that beautiful illusion, a special effects trick that most fans never noticed. So, how did they do it? The team behind Star Trek used a device called an Oxbury optical printer, cutting-edge gear for the 1960s. It let them scale images down or blow them up with precise focus. To build the illusion of space, the artist painted tiny black stars on a white board about 2.5 by 3 feet in size. Then they filmed that board moving in different directions, left, right, up, and down, each time using black masks to block out parts of the frame. By layering these different versions and adjusting the speed of each pass, they made it seem like the Enterprise was flying at warp speed through deep space. What started with a board of 500 stars might end up showing only 30 or so in a single pass. But together, those passes created the effect of motion and depth. And that wasn't the only trick. For stationary starfields, the team punched holes in black paper, some big, some small, and placed colored filters and diffusers behind them. That gave the stars a soft glow and helped sell the illusion that space was endless and layered. But here's why this trick was rarely used. It was a major time sink. Every shot had to be set up with incredible precision, and just filming one flyby could take an entire day. If they had multiple ships, explosions, or interactive lighting, that timeline stretched even longer, sometimes up to a full week for a few seconds of footage. Still, the results spoke for themselves. These methods gave the original series its signature look, and they pulled it off with tools, time, and a whole lot of creativity. Which behind-the-scenes Star Trek secret surprised you the most, and why? Unpainted set in Errand of Mercy. In Errand of Mercy, the first time we ever meet the Klingons, the tension is high, the stakes are clear, and the set, well, it's not quite finished. If you've got a sharp eye, you might notice a few things that weren't supposed to make it into the final cut. During the initial Klingon attack sequence, there's a wide shot where Spock is standing near the edge of the frame. Look just below him, and you'll catch a piece of raw, unpainted lumber sticking out from the set. It's not even disguised, just plain wood left unfinished during construction. That's not the only spot where the illusion slips. When the Enterprise returns fire on the Klingon ship, another unpolished plank is visible near the bottom of the screen, complete with gray paint drips running down the side. It's easy to miss if you're caught up in the action, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it doesn't stop there. As Spock walks beside Kirk's command chair, his floor mark, the spot that tells him where to stand, shows up near his feet. Later, when Kirk gets thrown into a jail cell beside Spock, the big reveal isn't just the force of the throw. It's the bright blue crash mat clearly visible on the floor, there to break his fall. So, why didn't these mistakes ruin the magic? Because Star Trek made minimalism work in its favor. The sets were simple, the effects practical, and the universe was built with more imagination than materials. That stripped-down look focused your attention on the characters and the story, Even a small prop or background detail felt important in that clean, efficient world. In a way, these budget limitations helped shape the show's entire aesthetic. Visible set rigging in Where No Man Has Gone Before. Right from the start, Star Trek was aiming big, but if you look closely at some of the earliest episodes, you'll catch signs of just how limited their production really was. One of the clearest examples? The second pilot episode, Where No Man Has Gone Before. This episode, crucial in selling the show to the network, is packed with drama, action, and a few unintended backstage glimpses. During the scenes set at the Delta Vega lithium cracking station, some behind-the-scenes equipment sneaks into view. In wide shots of the control room, especially during the showdown between Captain Kirk and the now superpowered Gary Mitchell, you can actually spot metal scaffolding and support beams just beyond the set walls. These were part of the stage rigging used to hold up the fake walls and lighting gear. And that's not all. Look carefully, and you'll see electrical cables trailing along the floor in some scenes, something you'd never see in a modern sci-fi series. These bits of stage equipment weren't supposed to be in the frame, but with the fast-paced shooting schedule and a tight budget, some of it ended up on screen anyway. Now, for audiences in the 1960s, none of this really mattered. Most people were watching on small black and white TVs, focused on the story and the futuristic world it promised. But for today's viewers, especially those watching in HD, these background flubs are a lot more obvious. Bubble wrap as Klingon armor. Here's something that'll change the way you look at Klingons forever. Those tough, warlike aliens with their fierce armor? Part of their costume was made from bubble wrap. Yep, plain old packing material helped bring the galaxy's most feared warriors to life. This little-known costume trick showed up during the first season of the original Star Trek. In the episode Errand of Mercy, John Colicos, playing the iconic Klingon commander Kor, wore what looked like solid alien gear. But look closer, and you'll see his belt buckle was actually made from bubble wrap. It wasn't just slapped on, though. The team painted it, shaped it, and placed it carefully so it looked like high-tech armor. They even had a name for it. Sealed Air. Just like the company that makes it. Now, you might think they did this to save money, and sure, Star Trek had a tight budget. But that's not the whole story. Costume designer Bill Thies explained that using materials in unusual ways was part of the vision. He said the secret to creating futuristic looks was all about taking everyday stuff and putting it out of context. And when you think about it, he was right. That bumpy texture, once painted and worked into a costume, looked alien enough to pass as battle armor. Fans didn't spot it for years. That's how well it worked. Only when die-hard Trekkies started studying every frame did they realize what they'd been looking at all along. Mayberry backlot reuse. Here's a wild crossover you probably never expected. Turns out Captain Kirk and Spock once walked the same streets as Sheriff Andy Taylor. That's right, the quiet town of Mayberry from the Andy Griffith Show doubled as the setting for 2 unforgettable Star Trek episodes. It's one of those clever behind-the-scenes tricks that shows just how resourceful TV productions had to be in the 60s. The sets weren't just shared, they were transformed. The town square from the Andy Griffith Show, complete with places like Floyd's Barbershop and Walker's Drugstore, got a sci-fi makeover. The buildings that were usually filmed to look like one-story shops were suddenly shown in full, with extra detail added to make them look more otherworldly or like period-accurate locations. Actress Joan Collins, who guest-starred in the fan-favorite episode The City on the Edge of Forever, later said she reported to the very same soundstage where the Andy Griffith Show was filmed. That's how close these 2 TV worlds really were. So where can you spot Mayberry on Star Trek? 2 episodes in particular make it pretty obvious. In Miri, the familiar backlot became a ghost town run by children after a strange virus wiped out the adults. Then in The City on the Edge of Forever, that same town square transformed into 1930s New York, where Kirk and Spock travel through time. If you look closely, you can even see the old Floyd's barbershop sign in the background, clear as day. Why go to all this trouble? It came down to money. The city on the edge of forever ran way over budget, costing about $245,000 when they only had $191,000 to work with. So the director, Joseph Pevney, had to get creative, using existing sets and filming non-stop to stay on schedule. Starfleet insignia wasn't always universal. You know that arrowhead on Captain Kirk's uniform, the one we all recognize as the symbol of Starfleet? Turns out, it wasn't always meant to stand for the entire organization. In fact, during the original Star Trek series, that emblem only represented the crew of the USS Enterprise. Yep, even diehard fans often miss this detail. If you go back and look closely at different episodes, you'll see other ships had their own insignias. For example, in the Omega Glory, the crew of the USS Exeter wore a badge shaped like a circle with a vertical spike. Then there's the Tholian, Webb, where the crew of the USS Defiant had a hollow version of the Delta, without the starburst design Kirk's crew had. Even engineers from starbases had a totally different look, a kind of spiral emblem. Why all the variation? It was actually by design. Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek's creator, had a military background, and he treated Starfleet insignias like real-world unit patches. Each ship or outpost had its own. So how did the arrowhead become the symbol for all of Starfleet? That shift happened after the original series ended. Because the Enterprise's 5-year mission was seen as a huge success, both in the show and in real life, Starfleet decided to honor that legacy. By the time Star Trek the Motion Picture hit theaters, every officer was wearing that same arrowhead. The in-universe explanation? Starfleet made it their official symbol to commemorate the achievements of Kirk and his crew. Later shows kept the tradition going. The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager all used the arrowhead, though each series tweaked the design to fit the times. And in Star Trek, Enterprise, which is set before Kirk's era, they skipped the arrowhead completely and used an oval-shaped patch instead, reflecting a different time in Starfleet history. Boom mic cameo in Charlie X. Even the most loyal Trekkies might have missed this accidental cameo, a boom mic that shows up in the 3rd episode of the original Star Trek series, Charlie X. That's right, an actual piece of sound equipment made its way into the final cut, and it's been hiding there ever since. So, how did it happen? In one key scene, Charlie walks up to Yeoman Rand to give her a gift, but if you look closely, about 6 minutes and 48 seconds into the episode, you'll spot something odd. Right at the bottom of the screen, a boom microphone dips into the shot and hangs around for a bit. It's there for multiple angles as the two characters interact. This wasn't as rare as you might think. Back in the 1960s, Star Trek was filmed on tight sound stages with limited space and camera coverage. Keeping all that gear out of the frame was tricky, and since editing tools weren't what they are today, mistakes like this sometimes slipped through and ended up in the finished episode. And Charlie X has more than just the boom mic blunder. A few minutes earlier, around 4:56, you can actually see the floor marks for the actors. There's one for Charlie, and a longer one for Dr. McCoy. Later, when Uhura gives Captain Kirk a message from Captain Ramart, you'll notice tape markers in the background showing where Charlie should stand after leaving the turbo lift. Boom shadows pop up in other episodes, too. In The Enemy Within, for example, fans have spotted shadows from microphones right above the actors' heads. But here's the thing. Fans don't mind. In fact, they love it. These goofs have become part of Star Trek's charm. Websites like Ex Astra Scientia even collect and catalog these flubs for fellow eagle-eyed viewers. For many, spotting a crew member or a shadow in the background just makes the show feel more real, like a behind-the-scenes peek into how it all came together. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment yes to let us know you're still following. GNDN Pipes Joke. If you've ever spotted the letters GNDN on pipes around the Enterprise and wondered what they meant, you're not alone. Turns out, it's one of the best inside jokes hidden in Star Trek, and most fans never even noticed it. So what does GNDN stand for? Simple. Goes nowhere, does nothing. According to John Jeffries, who helped design the sets, the Enterprise was filled with pipes and conduits labeled with all kinds of codes and symbols. Among them were these GNDN pipes. They weren't connected to anything, they didn't serve any function. They were just part of the set dressing. But the joke stuck. These labels were placed on decorative pipes to give the ship a lived-in technical look. Over time, GNDN became a recurring gag for the crew and the designers. And it didn't stop there. The team even gave these fake fixtures a nickname. They called them Gundans, a fun spin on the acronym. It was a clever way to stay entertained during long days on set. The production team had a tough job making everything look real, and these small bits of humor helped lighten the mood. Still, not everything about it was just for laughs. As production designer Dave Blass later explained, there was always a balance between realism and fun. "We want to make it accurate," he said, "but also proper. Not just a joke for the sake of a joke." So what happened to the GNDN gag? It lived on. When the Deep Space Nine team recreated the original Enterprise sets for their 30th anniversary episode, Trials and Tribulations, they made sure to include GNDN pipes as a tribute to the original crew's creativity. Some fans still argue about whether the labels are clearly visible in the old episodes, but the legend remains strong. Shuttle set glitch in Galileo 7. In the Galileo 7, what's supposed to be a tense survival story also gives us a few unexpected glimpses behind the curtain, moments where the illusion of deep space breaks down and the studio set peeks through. These small slip-ups aren't just bloopers, they're part of what makes early Star Trek production so fascinating. The episode centers on Spock and a small crew stranded on a hostile planet inside the shuttlecraft Galileo. But if you're paying close attention, you'll spot a few production flaws hiding in plain sight. For example, when Spock turns around in the shuttle's rear compartment after ordering the hull to be electrified, you can actually see the edge of the set behind him. Later, when McCoy and Boma carry Gaetano's body to the back of the shuttle, the top of the blue stage backdrop shows through the doorway, clearly revealing the limits of the constructed set. That's not all. When the camera swings around to simulate a crewman's point of view, the upper edge of the background becomes visible again, only to be quickly panned away before it ruins the shot completely. Even the planet's surface has its own quirks. In the middle of all the action, you might notice that the ground doesn't always behave like real rock. When one of the alien spears hits the landscape, the rock wobbles. And sometimes, bits of styrofoam fly off. Back on the bridge, the technical glitches continue. After Spock ignites the fuel as a distress signal, shadows from off-camera equipment sweep across the helm console, another sign of the crew doing their best with limited resources. When it came time to remaster the series, the team faced a major challenge. Unlike modern shows that had full archives of raw footage, Star Trek only had its 35mm broadcast prints. That meant no widescreen upgrade and very little flexibility for editing around these old-school flubs. But rather than erase them completely, the remastering team chose to preserve the spirit of the original show, flaws and all. And honestly, that's part of the magic. From Fonzie's leather to vanishing siblings, Happy Days left behind more than laughs. It made history. Which fact surprised you most? Drop a comment, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss another blast from the past.